let me ask you a question. How many people can understand Italian? Okay, it's better with English. I will go with English, no problem. So, my name is Elly Schlein. I'm very honored to be here with you today. And let me thank you, Podemos and Pablo, for organizing this discussion, because it feels very good to recognize ourselves in our words, in our fights. That's the first very important issue. Now, who we are, just to introduce myself and ourselves. First thing, I would have never thought to end up in the European Parliament as a politician. That's the first thing you have to know about myself. About my party, Possibile. In 2013, you know, there were elections in Italy, and the center-left did not win in both chambers. And the Democratic Party, we were in the Democratic Party at the time, had this wonderful idea to form a government together with a guy that you might know called Silvio Berlusconi. We were the ones strongly opposing such a big coalition, and I was part of a spontaneous movement called Occupy PD, Partito Democratico. We were occupying literally the sections of the party, but we lost that fight because the government was made with Berlusconi. Then we tried to make the same point at the party congress in 2013. I was, for example, supporting and helping to organize the campaign of Pippo Civati. He was an opponent of Renzi and Cooperlo in that fight, if you have followed it. And the idea was that, Civati was able to take back many of us to politics because we were disillusioned. We felt not represented anymore. But at a certain point, we realized that if we stayed apart from politics, and for very good reason, because we were disillusioned, because we were fed up with the same political class for the last 20 years, that from the left or from the right were not giving the answer that the country needed. At that point, we realized that if we stayed away, then the same usual people was still going on into politics. It was, in a way, strengthening them that we stood away. And so the only right thing to do was to get involved personally, because you cannot expect anybody else to make and be the change that you want to see unless you do your part. So that was the main idea of that campaign. We were trying to represent the need for a huge change and for radical answers to radical times, saying that an alternative is always possible, possibile. That's the meaning. For years we've been told that there are no alternatives to big coalition, to things like they are. It's not true. And it's a right-wing statement, by the way. Margaret Thatcher used to say that, Tina, there is no alternative. So we were strongly fighting this idea. And let me say, it was also a battle for internal democracy at the time. The party supporters needed to participate to decisions, and it wasn't like that, and it's still not like that in that party. But we had no money, no support of the establishment or media, obviously. In Italy, change is always seen with suspicion. But still, we had a huge grassroots mobilization, and Arturo knows what I'm talking about, obviously. Not that huge, but a huge mobilization. And we got 400,000 votes in the primary election, 15% of the party, which wasn't bad, let me say. Renzi won very easily. And after 2 months, he got bored like a child, you know, bored of the new job after 2 months, and he decided to become prime minister without going through elections, without asking to the citizens what they wanted after 3 years of disastrous big coalition governments, without having a platform, a clear platform of the reform he wanted to pass. So in the executive direction of the party, we were the only ones, 16 against 146, I think, to vote against that government. And he took it very personal, let me say, and he decided to take revenge, and he decided that day that we should slowly die in the Democratic Party, with no political space at all, and no media space at all, because the things are connected, you know. Media has huge responsibility in Italy. So we had a huge event to decide together with our supporters what to do. And a slight majority, really slight, it was like 51, I think, decided that we should stay in and try to change things from within the party and be the internal opposition, let's say. But after a year, it became clear that it was impossible because the change that Renzi impressed to the party was irreversible in a way. He managed to move the party completely to the right. He pushed terrible reforms on job market, electoral reform, constitutional reform, environmental issues. I will tell you something about those kind of reforms. On the job market, it was destroying the last rights of the workers and precarizing even more the job market. On the environment, choosing once again concrete and oil drilling, like the lobby wants to do, right? So, and on the electoral reform and constitutional reform, you might know that we have a huge constitutional referendum now, coming up, probably in December. And I mean, it's going to be a very strong fight because the rhetoric and propaganda of the government is very strong. So the idea is to reduce even more the space of democracy and representation, which is exactly, if you think about it, the opposite of what we need to find again a way to, regain trust of citizens in a moment where they stopped going to vote, which is going exactly in the right direction. So we have to fight it. I mean, I don't want to be technical here about the details, but let me just say that the reform was imagined with Berlusconi at the time when Renzi became the leader of the party. And it is based on lies. It says it is to reduce the cost of politics. Well, if you have to reduce it, we were proposing to eliminate a third of the members of the parliament and eliminate a third of their indemnity. That was an idea. You could do it by law. You didn't need a constitutional reform to do that. The constitutional reform decides that the second chamber isn't elected anymore by citizens, but by regional parliaments, which are, let me say, the most corrupted political class in Italy. So it's not a smart idea, I would say. And unless your aim is to, again, put all politics into the palace, where there are agreements between political forces and you can deal with it. No, non disturbare il manovratore, we say in Italian. You can understand that very well, I think. So, it was too much, obviously, and finally, in last May, we left the party. If you were fighting against and occupying against the big coalition, you can only leave when you understand it's the big coalition who occupied that party. That's the only thing, out of coherence with our battles, that we could do. And it was, let me say, a family reunification, because our supporters, people and voters, had already taken that decision long before, when they saw the first reforms. So we founded Possibile, a message that is not far from Unidos Podemos. Possibile means refusing that dogma. If we are told that there are no alternatives, we have to build together one, a new one. But how? That's the huge point of discussion, and I see that you're discussing it as well in this school. We were discussing with other forces of the left, asking them to avoid the same usual mistake of a top-down discussion, of a tavolo costituente della sinistra, like a fusion of political classes already existing in the left parties. That is not working anymore. That doesn't talk to anyone anymore. So the only way to have unity at the left is to work on common issues, common fights, and obviously to have a common and develop a common vision of the future of the country. There is no way it will work from the top to the bottom. So that was what we were asking, together with a second point. No ambiguity in the relationship with this democratic party. Because unfortunately, let me say, still many comrades think that we can attack at the national level what the government of Renzi and Partito Democratico are doing, but at the local level it's good to, be at the government with them. We think that it's not the case anymore. And because when it's so much moved to the right, then it's not a difference that you can tell to people. As soon as they see that symbol, they don't want to vote it anymore. And they are right, obviously. So that's what we started to discuss with other parties. When we founded Possibile, our main worry was the growing abstention. And in my region, Emilia-Romagna, Bologna, you might know, only 37% went out to vote at the last regional election. Can you imagine it? 37%. It was a region where 90% of the people went out to vote before. But still, we are convinced that it doesn't mean that there is a lack of will to participate. People organize themselves around issues they care about, like the common goods, environmental causes, but they do so outside of the traditional political parties. And we think that since the intermediate corps, do you say that? Corp intermedi, are still needed, then politicians have to, with umiltà, you understand umiltà? Put themselves all'ascolto, you understand ascolto, to listen to what is already moving across society, never with the presunzione, do you say presunzione? With the arrogance to want to guide it or guide this kind of process, but the highest ambition, with the highest ambition to accompany them, to be again back at the center of political debate. That is what we are trying to do. So now, in our symbol, we have put the sign of unequal. And people joke because they say it looks like a stop sign, you know, for the car. But we put it there because it's the biggest challenge of our time, fighting inequalities. That's also what Bernie Sanders put at the very top of the agenda when he talks about the real issues. That's exactly the point. Inequalities of knowledge, of power, of income, inequalities of access to rights, for example, which is another part of the story. So just to not to bore you too much, I wanted to add a couple of points. I know that it is not an easy time for you in Podemos. I know that you are discussing openly and frankly in the movement about its future, about strategy, about how to reach the ones who haven't trusted you so far. And I am only an external friend and a comrade who doesn't know enough about the Spanish political spectrum, but knows enough about politics to avoid speaking about the situation from the outside that we can only know superficially. But I learned a lot in this day and yesterday listening to Inigo at the opening. But let me tell you something. What you did until here is already amazing, is already impressive in such a short time. And it is a sign of hope for so many across Europe. I know it wasn't enough to have a Gobierno del Cambio yet, let's say yet, but you are trying to shape a new reality. And this process can take a long time. And when we decided to go out of the Democratic Party, we were telling a story that maybe now is clearer to many other people. Because 1 year ago, some of them thought we were crazy, thought we were not right when we said, look, it's going to be much worse than this. It's going even worse every day. So now, what we have said 1 year ago is it's that the center-left as we knew it in Italy does not exist anymore. That means we have a very difficult role in society. You know when you fall asleep in the sofa in front of the TV. There's always a guy that comes and says, come on, wake up, you have to go to bed, right? And you hate that guy. You hate, but you know he's right. And maybe you answer 5 minutos más, but you know he's right. That's what we have to do. So my message is of hope. It's going to maybe take longer than you thought before, but it's still a very crucial role. So just to come to the conclusion, the disillusion and frustration of people against the establishment, against the political class, can meet answers from the right, see Trump, see Farage, see Le Pen, see Salvini, or from the left, okay? But those votes are much more volatile. That consensus is precarious, is much more unstable. And the time at your disposal to show change is even less than before. It's also the Renzi parabola. When he went through first election, European election, he got 31% of the votes. It was huge. A huge hope from Italian citizens, not very much from us. We knew already how it would end up, but a huge hope, and now it's not like that anymore. They lost Rome. You know about the 5-star movement. That's another story. Why is it so difficult for us to, as the Italian left, get together and, of course, grow? Because that political space of opposing the not so much different anymore center-left and center-right, meaning the right in Italy and the Partito Democratico was covered already by the Faster movement, which are fighting against corruption, we have many battles in common with them, but one huge difference: there is no real internal democracy in that party. And one another problem is that you have to decide what is your vision of the future of the country. You cannot put together the disappointed voter of the right and of the left against corruption. That is good. But at the same time, you don't know who you represent in society. The most vulnerable parts of society. You have to decide what is your position on immigrants, okay, on racism, on xenophobia, and on the workers and the right of the workers. And they have not decided yet what they want to do. That's the main issue with them. So, coming to the conclusion, what happened, we're living in a paradox. The crisis of an incredibly, wildly unscrupulous individualistic model, like the current neoliberal capitalism, hasn't led to a collective response, if you think about it, but to the crisis of democracy representation and in the intermediate corps, has left everyone even more alone than before. Workers against other workers, selfishness, lack of solidarity, mutual mistrust, you were talking about that too, a war between poors. So that's the point. I think that the right-wing movement and nationalist movements, internationally speaking, at the European level, are forming it's a paradox, I know, but they're moving as a European front, using the same rhetoric in every country, which is working very well. And I think the European left has to do the same. Otherwise, we cannot win. And let me tell you why, and I'm concluding with this. All the challenges that we are facing right now, if you think about them, let me just mention the biggest 5. Migration issues, with 6 member states in Europe out of 28 that are dealing with 80% of asylum requests that arrive in all Europe. Is that solidarity? I don't think so. Is that an equal share of responsibility? I was in New York yesterday discussing at the UN summit on refugees and migrants exactly this. This is not sustainable. This is not solidarity. The second one, economic and social policies, the battles against austerity measures, okay? The arrogance, the dogmatic arrogance showed against Greece, for example, okay? That's another issue. Fiscal policies, oh my God. Apple, multinational companies, we know about that. How is it possible that in Europe we have paradisi fiscali? How is it possible that in Europe we accept tremendous fiscal competition among member states of the same union, with companies having 0.005% as a tax rate? So, another issue, and the climate change issue, which needs common rules, sanctionable rules, okay? And just to stop here with these main issues, they are all issues that are now European and global issues. That means that the answer that we can develop at the national level are not enough anymore. That's why we really need to unite, because as Professor Ferraioli correctly pointed out, the Constitution after the Second World War realized across Europe that for every power you have to pose a limit at the same level. But that was a world where powers moved across at the national level. Today, the powers with globalization move easily at another level. All our enemies are moving at another level. Economic, financial powers, criminal organization, the right-wing organization, okay? So that's why we need to pose a limit at the same level, and we need European piazze, European debates, European parties and forces, at least, coordination, much more stronger coordination of them in order to fight them and finally win. One last sentence. I want to leave you with this quote of my favorite writer in Italian. I'm going to read it in Italian because I'm sure you can understand this. It says, it's Stefano Benni, maybe somebody knows it. It says, in me ci si può perdere, ma ritrovarsi è splendida battaglia. Di tutte le bugie e le catene, almeno da una sii libero. Non dobbiamo sperare, possiamo ogni istante del giorno. Thanks very much.